The departure board at SeaTac International Airport flickered with destinations that read like a dream itinerary. London, Paris, Rome, Barcelona. I stood in the check-in line for British Airways Flight 48, watching my family navigate the chaos of international travel with varying degrees of success. My father, Richard Carlson, commanded the operation like the former Air Force colonel he was, barking instructions about passport placement and carry-on regulations. My mother, Patricia, fluttered between suitcases, double-checking that her jewelry roll was in her purse, not the checked luggage. My younger sister, Jennifer, posed for Instagram stories against the backdrop of the departure board, her husband Mark dutifully holding her phone at the most flattering angle. And then there was Grandma Eleanor, standing slightly apart from the orchestrated chaos, her single suitcase modest compared to the mountain of designer luggage my family had accumulated. At 82, she moved with the careful dignity of someone who refused to acknowledge that age had slowed her step. Her eyes, the same steel gray that I'd inherited, sparkled with an excitement I hadn't seen since Grandpa died 5 years ago. My name is Thomas Carlson. I'm 36 years old, and I work as a financial advisor at one of Seattle's premier wealth management firms. It's a job that requires me to understand the intricate relationships between money and family, to navigate the delicate dynamics that emerge when significant assets are involved. But nothing in my professional experience had prepared me for what was about to unfold in that airport, or for the choice I would have to make between the family vacation of a lifetime and the grandmother who had given her lifetime savings to be part of it. The Europe trip had been my father's idea, conceived during one of his increasingly frequent lectures about making memories while we still can. He'd retired from Boeing 2 years earlier with a pension that, combined with my mother's inheritance from her parents, had left them more than comfortable. The newfound freedom of retirement had awakened something in him, a not quite wanderlust, but a desire to display the success he'd achieved through 40 years of military service and corporate climbing. 3 weeks, he'd announced at Sunday dinner 6 months ago, spreading glossy brochures across Grandma's dining table like battle plans. London, Paris, Rome, Barcelona, with stops in Switzerland and the French Riviera. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, private tours, the full European experience. Jennifer had squealed with delight, immediately calculating how many Instagram followers she could gain from such a trip. Mark, ever the supportive husband despite being relegated to photographer and bag carrier, had nodded enthusiastically. My mother had worried aloud about the logistics while secretly eyeing the spa treatments at the luxury hotels. And Grandma Eleanor had sat quietly at the head of her own table, fingers tracing the edges of a brochure featuring the Eiffel Tower, a wistful expression crossing her weathered face. "Sounds wonderful," she'd said softly. "Your grandfather always promised we'd see Paris someday." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unfulfilled promises. Grandpa James had been a mechanic, a good man who'd worked honest hours for honest pay but never quite managed to save enough for the European honeymoon he'd promised his young bride. They'd raised 3 children on his salary, put them through college, helped with down payments on houses. The trip to Paris had been perpetually postponed until the kids were older, until the mortgage was paid, until retirement, until suddenly there was no more time left. "Well," my father had said, already gathering the brochures with the efficiency of someone who'd made his point and was ready to move on, "it's a shame the timing never worked out." That's when I'd seen it, the flash of something in Grandma's eyes. Not disappointment, she was too used to that, but determination, the same steel that had carried her through the Depression, through raising 3 kids on a mechanic's salary, through 5 years of widowhood with grace and dignity. "What if I came with you?" she'd asked, the question stopping my father mid-reach for a brochure. The silence that followed was telling. Jennifer's eyes had widened with something between surprise and alarm. My mother had developed a sudden fascination with her water glass. Mark had pulled out his phone, the universal gesture of someone desperately trying to avoid involvement in family drama. "Mom," my father had said, his tone taking on the patronizing quality he used with difficult clients. "That's sweet, but this isn't really a senior-friendly trip. Lots of walking, busy airports, foreign food. You'd be more comfortable here." "I can walk just fine," Grandma had replied, that steel showing through more clearly now. "And I've been eating foreign food since before you were born, Richard. Your father brought me to that Italian place for our anniversary every year. It's also quite expensive," my mother had added, trying for gentle concern but landing somewhere closer to transparent discouragement. "The hotels alone are." "I have money saved," Grandma had interrupted, something she rarely did. "James's life insurance, plus what I've put aside over the years. I've been saving for something special, and this would be special." I'd watched my father's face cycle through emotions, irritation at being challenged, calculation of the social optics, and finally a resignation that looked like generosity if you didn't examine it too closely. "Well, if you really think you're up for it," he'd said, tone suggesting he hoped she'd reconsider. "But you'll need to book quickly. These tours fill up." What followed was 6 months of subtle discouragement disguised as concern. My mother worried aloud about Grandma's medications and foreign pharmacies. Jennifer fretted about the pace of the itinerary, how Grandma might slow them down during their carefully scheduled Instagram opportunities. My father sent articles about travel health insurance, pickpockets targeting elderly tourists, the difficulties of navigating European cities with mobility issues, despite Grandma having no mobility issues beyond the careful gait of octogenarian caution. Through it all, Grandma had persisted with quiet determination. She'd renewed her passport, bought comfortable walking shoes, even taken a conversational French class at the community center. When my father had tried to book her into separate, more senior-appropriate hotels, she'd insisted on staying with the family. When Jennifer had suggested maybe Grandma could skip some of the more strenuous activities, Grandma had produced a letter from her doctor clearing her for all physical activities. The real shock had come when Grandma had revealed exactly how much she'd spent to join the trip. $30,000, nearly half her liquid savings, for first-class flights, luxury accommodations, and her share of the private tours. It was an astronomical sum for a woman who still clipped coupons and reused aluminum foil, who had darned the same cardigan for 20 years rather than buy a new one. "Mom, this is insane." My father had exploded when he'd learned the amount. $30,000? For a vacation? Do you know what that money could? Yes. Grandma had cut him off, showing more backbone than I'd seen in years. "I know exactly what it could do. Could give me 3 weeks with my family, seeing places I've dreamed about for 60 years. Could give me memories to carry through whatever time I have left. It could let me keep one promise to James, even if he's not here to see it." The discussion had ended there, but the tension had persisted, an undercurrent of resentment that flavored every subsequent conversation about the trip. My family had gotten used to Grandma being the one who gave, babysitting for free, hosting holidays, slipping $20 bills into birthday cards. The idea of her spending lavishly on herself, of claiming space in their carefully curated vacation, seemed to offend some unspoken rule about the natural order of things. I tried to stay neutral, though privately I'd been thrilled for Grandma. She'd sacrificed so much over the years, always putting others first. If she wanted to blow 30 grand on a European adventure, more power to her. I'd even offered to help with some of the costs, but she'd refused with a pride that reminded me why I'd always admired her. "This is something I need to do for myself," she'd said during one of our weekly coffee dates. "With my own money on my own terms. Can you understand that, Tommy?" Could. In my line of work, I saw too many elderly clients whose children made all their financial decisions, treating them like incompetent children rather than adults who'd managed just fine for decades. Grandma's determination to fund her own adventure was about more than money. It was about agency, dignity, the right to make her own choices while she still could. Now, standing in the airport check-in line, I watched her carefully. She dressed for the occasion in her best traveling outfit, pressed slacks, a soft blue sweater, comfortable but stylish shoes. Her silver hair was freshly set, and she'd even applied a touch of lipstick, something she rarely did anymore. She looked like what she was, a woman embarking on the adventure of a lifetime. "Passports out, everyone," my father commanded, though we were still 10 minutes from the counter. "Patricia, stop fussing with your bag." Jennifer, put the phone away. "Mother, do you have your documents ready?" "Right here," Grandma said, patting her travel purse. She'd shown me the contents earlier: passport, travel insurance, copies of all her bookings, even a small phrase book she'd been studying. She was more prepared than Jennifer, who'd probably forgotten her passport entirely if Mark hadn't reminded her. The line moved slowly, giving me time to observe the family dynamics I'd grown so accustomed to that I rarely noticed them anymore. My father used to command and control, treating vacation logistics like a military operation. My mother, anxious about appearances, worried about looking provincial in European capitals. Jennifer, seeing the entire trip through the lens of social media opportunities. And Mark, just trying to keep his wife happy while managing her expectations and carry-on luggage. Where did I fit in this tableau? The responsible older son? The one who'd followed in Dad's footsteps professionally if not personally. Single at 36, married to my career. A source of both pride and concern for my parents. "When are you going to settle down?" was my mother's refrain, as if romantic happiness could be scheduled like a client meeting. The truth was, my work with wealthy families had made me cynical about marriage. I saw too many relationships that were more about asset management than affection, too many couples who stayed together for the portfolio rather than passion. My parents' marriage fell somewhere in the middle, not loveless, but not exactly loving either. A successful partnership that had produced the required offspring and accumulated the expected assets. Grandma's marriage had been different. Even 5 years after Grandpa's death, she still wore her wedding ring, still kept his coffee mug by the pot as if he might walk in any moment. They'd had something real, something that had survived decades of financial stress and family challenges. Maybe that's why she was so determined to make this trip, not just to see Europe, but to honor the dreams they'd shared. We reached the check-in counter, and my father took charge, presenting our documents with military precision. The agent, a harried-looking woman who'd clearly dealt with too many entitled travelers already, began processing our tickets with the weary efficiency of someone counting the hours until her shift ended. 6 passengers for the London flight, she confirmed, fingers flying over her keyboard. "I show 5 tickets here. Carlson, Richard. Carlson, Patricia. Carlson, Jennifer. Davies, Mark. Carlson, Thomas." My father frowned, leaning over the counter. "There should be 6. Eleanor Carlson." The agent typed again, brow furrowing. "I'm not showing that reservation in the system. Do you have the confirmation number?" "Of course I have the..." My father patted his jacket pocket, then his pants, his movements becoming increasingly agitated. "Patricia, did you see the folder with Mother's documents?" "I thought you had everything," my mother replied, her voice taking on the sharp edge of travel anxiety. "You said you'd handle all the bookings." "I did handle them. I specifically remember." My father trailed off, now searching through his carry-on with increasing desperation. "This is impossible. I booked all 6 tickets at the same time." But even as he said it, I saw something flicker across his face, not surprise, but calculation. The expression was gone in an instant, replaced by frustrated concern. But I'd seen it. In my profession, you learn to read the micro-expressions that reveal true intentions, the tiny tells that separate honest mistakes from orchestrated deceptions. "Sir, I need you to step aside if you don't have all your documentation," the agent said, gesturing to the growing line behind us. "You can sort this out at customer service." "This is ridiculous," my father blustered, but he was already gathering his documents, already moving us away from the counter. "There must be some computer error." "Mother, did you receive your confirmation email?" Grandma was searching through her travel purse now, hands shaking slightly. I thought you were handling everything, Richard. You said to just send you the money and you'd take care of the bookings." "Which I did," he insisted, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. "This is clearly the airline's mistake. Don't worry, we'll sort this out." But we didn't sort it out. An hour of increasingly frantic discussions with customer service revealed what my father claimed was shocking news. Grandma's ticket had never been purchased. There was no record of a sixth passenger, no confirmation number, no evidence that Eleanor Carlson had ever been booked on British Airways Flight 48 to London. "This is impossible," my father kept saying, his performance growing more elaborate with each repetition. "I distinctly remember booking 6 tickets. I have the credit card charge right here, see? $52,000, which would be..." "Oh," he made a show of calculating. That's only 5 first-class tickets, isn't it?" The realization that my father, a man who could calculate missile trajectories in his head, who'd managed multi-million-dollar budgets at Boeing, was pretending to be bad at basic math told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. "Well, can't we just buy another ticket?" Grandma asked, hope fighting with growing understanding in her voice. The customer service agent shook her head apologetically. "I'm sorry, but the flight is completely sold out. First class and economy. The next available seat to London isn't until Thursday." "Thursday?" Jennifer's voice rose to a pitch typically reserved for true catastrophes, like finding out a restaurant didn't have Wi-Fi. "But our hotel reservations, the Tower of London tour, my Instagram schedule. We can't wait until Thursday," my father said firmly. "The whole itinerary would have to be rearranged. The hotels, the tours, the train tickets between cities. It would be a nightmare." "Then I'll fly Thursday and meet you," Grandma said quietly. "I can catch up in Paris or..." "Don't be ridiculous, Mother." My father's mask of concern was firmly back in place. "You can't navigate international airports alone. And what would you do in London by yourself for 3 days? No, the sensible thing is for you to go home. We'll plan another trip, something more suitable for your age and limitations." The word hung in the air like a slap. Limitations. As if Grandma hadn't raised 3 children through recessions and oil crises. As if she hadn't nursed Grandpa through his final illness while maintaining her dignity and grace. As if age had somehow erased the steel spine that had carried our entire family. "Richard," my mother said softly, and for a moment I thought she might defend Grandma, but instead, "Your mother's right. It would be too difficult for her to manage alone. These things happen. I'm sure she understands." They all looked at Grandma then, waiting for her to play her assigned role. The understanding elder. The self-sacrificing matriarch who would smile and say, "Of course, you young people go have fun. Don't worry about me." The woman who would go quietly home to her empty house and pretend that $30,000 and a lifetime of dreams were a small price to pay for not making a fuss. But Grandma didn't smile. She stood there in her best traveling clothes, with her freshly set hair and her careful lipstick, and I watched something die in her eyes. Not hope, that had been fading for months as the subtle discouragements piled up. But faith, maybe. The belief that family meant something more than shared DNA and obligatory holiday dinners. "I see," she said finally, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Well, I suppose." "No." The word came out of my mouth before I'd consciously decided to speak. 5 heads turned to stare at me, as if the furniture had suddenly developed opinions. "No?" my father repeated, his colonel's voice carrying a warning. "No," I said again, more firmly. "This isn't right. Grandma paid $30,000 for this trip. She's been preparing for months. And you're telling me that somehow, mysteriously, only her ticket failed to get booked? Despite you handling all the arrangements? Despite having her money? What exactly are you implying?" My father's face was reddening, a danger sign I'd learned to fear as a child. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Grandma gave you $30,000. That money was specifically for her trip. Where is it? How dare you? Where is it, Dad?" Pressed. "Show me the refund. If her ticket was never purchased, you should have $30,000 to return to her right now." The silence stretched taut as a wire. Jennifer fidgeted with her phone. Mark studied his shoes. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. And my father looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, more like recognition. The moment when you realize someone else can see through your carefully constructed facade. "The money has been allocated to group expenses," he said finally. "Hotels, tours, transportation. That she won't be using," I finished. "So you'll be refunding her, of course. Today. Before you leave." "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is." I turned to Grandma, who was watching this family drama with the detached interest of someone who'd already emotionally checked out. "Grandma, did you authorize Dad to use your money for anything other than your personal travel expenses?" "No," she said quietly. "It was specifically for my ticket and my portion of the hotels." "Then legally," my father's voice rose to parade ground volume. "You're going to stand here and threaten me with legal action? Your own father? Over some bookkeeping confusion?" "It's not confusion," I said, matching his volume with calm that I knew would infuriate him more. "It's theft. You took her money and used it to subsidize your own vacation, hoping she'd be too polite to make a fuss when you abandoned her at the airport." "Thomas," my mother gasped, "how can you say such things?" "Because they're true." I looked at each of them in turn. "You've been trying to discourage her for months. The comments about her age, her limitations, the logistics. You never wanted her to come. You just wanted her money." "That's enough," my father growled. "If you can't be supportive of this family." "Supportive?" I laughed, the sound bitter in the sterile airport air. "Like you've been supportive of Grandma? Like you supported her when Grandpa died and she needed help figuring out finances? Oh wait, that was me who spent weekends helping her with insurance paperwork. Like you supported her when she had her hip surgery? Oh right, that was me who drove her to physical therapy while you were too busy with retirement golf. We've done plenty for Mother," my father protested, but his conviction was wavering. "Name one thing," I challenged. "One thing you've done in the last 5 years that wasn't about what you could get from her. The family dinners at her house where she does all the cooking. The visits that happen to coincide with when you need babysitting for Jennifer's kids. The birthday gifts she still gives despite being on a fixed income while you vacation in Europe. If you're so concerned about Mother," Jennifer interjected, finding her voice now that Instagram opportunities were at stake, "then why don't you stay with her? Someone should, I suppose." She said it like a threat, like missing the Europe trip would be the worst possible punishment. But looking at Grandma, really looking at her, Seeing the woman who'd taught me to tie my shoes and make paper airplanes, who'd never missed a school play or baseball game, who'd been more of a parent to me than the two people preparing to abandon her, the choice was suddenly crystal clear. "You're right," I said. "Someone should stay with her. Someone should give a damn about something other than themselves for once." I turned to the customer service agent, who'd been watching our family drama with the horrified fascination of someone trapped in a reality show they hadn't auditioned for. "Can you cancel my ticket, please? Thomas Carlson." "I won't be needing it." "Thomas, don't be ridiculous," my mother said. "You're overreacting. Think about what you're giving up." "I am thinking," I replied, pulling out my phone to complete the cancellation. "I'm thinking about what kind of person abandons their grandmother at an airport after taking $30,000 from her. I'm thinking about what kind of son allows it to happen. And I'm thinking that I don't want to spend 3 weeks in Europe with people who could do something like this." "If you walk away now," my father said, his voice dropping to the dangerous quiet that used to terrify me as a child, "don't expect to be welcomed back. This family has no room for disloyalty." Disloyalty? I looked at Grandma, standing there with her unused passport and broken dreams. "I don't think you understand what that word means." The final boarding call for Flight 48 echoed through the terminal. My family gathered their carry-ons, Jennifer still fretting about the disruption to her plans, my mother making one last attempt at peacekeeping that was really just enabling, my father maintaining his facade of wounded righteousness. "This is your last chance," he said, pulling on his jacket with military precision. "Come with us now, and we'll forget this unfortunate scene." "And Grandma?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. They left then, walking toward the gate without backward glances, apparently able to compartmentalize the abandonment of an elderly woman who'd given them everything. I watched until they disappeared down the jet bridge, half expecting one of them to turn around, to develop a conscience at the last moment. They didn't. Grandma and I stood in the suddenly quiet terminal, two people in traveling clothes with nowhere to travel. She hadn't spoken during the entire confrontation, and her silence now felt heavier than any accusation. "I'm sorry," I said finally, "about all of it. About them." She patted my arm with a hand that shook only slightly. "You have nothing to apologize for, Tommy. You're the only one who acted with honor today. What do you want to do now? We could try to book you on Thursday's flight, catch up with them." "No." The word was firm, final. "I've spent enough time and money chasing after people who don't want me around. I'd like to go home." We collected her luggage from the airline, a process that took another 2 hours of bureaucracy and barely concealed judgment from staff who clearly wondered what kind of family abandoned an elderly woman at the airport. I drove her home in silence, both of us processing what had just happened, what it meant for the carefully maintained fiction of our family dynamics. Her house, the same Rambler in Ballard where my father and his siblings had grown up, felt smaller somehow, as if the dreams that had filled it that morning had taken up physical space. I helped her inside with her suitcase, noting the Europe guidebooks still spread on the coffee table, the French phrases written on sticky notes attached to the refrigerator. "Tea?" she asked, already moving toward the kitchen with the automatic hospitality that was more reflex than desire. "Let me make it," I said, guiding her to her favorite chair. "You sit." I busied myself with the familiar ritual, the kettle that had to be positioned just right on the burner, the tea bags she still preferred over loose leaf, the sugar bowl that had belonged to her mother. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, I found her holding the phrase book, flipping through pages she'd probably memorized. "O est la tour Eiffel," she read aloud. "Where is the Eiffel Tower?" I practiced that one every day. Seemed important to be able to find the things you've dreamed about. "Grandma, do you know what the worst part is?" She set the book aside, fixing me with those steel gray eyes. "It's not the money. $30,000. It's just money. It's not even missing the trip, not really. I'm 82 years old. I've lived without seeing Paris this long. I can manage however much time I have left. Then what? It's knowing that I was such a fool. Her voice cracked slightly. Believing that they wanted me there. Convincing myself that all those little slights over the years were just my imagination. That deep down my son loved me the way I loved him. But he doesn't, does he? I'm just an inconvenience, a checkbook, an obligation to be managed. That's not true. Don't. She held up a hand. Please don't make excuses for them. That's what I've been doing for 40 years. And look where it's gotten me. Your father learned early that I'd always forgive, always understand, always put his needs first. And I did because that's what mothers do. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a person. I became a resource to be utilized, a problem to be solved, a burden to be minimized. I thought about contradicting her, offering some platitude about how family was complicated, how I'm sure my father loved her in his own way. But she deserved better than comfortable lies. When did it start? I asked instead. The distance. She considered this, sipping her tea. When he joined the Air Force, maybe. He came back different, harder, more concerned with status and achievement than connection. Or maybe when he married your mother. Patricia came from money, you know. Not rich, but comfortable in a way we'd never been. I think Richard was embarrassed by his working-class roots, by the small house and the mechanic father and the mother who mended clothes instead of buying new ones. But you gave him everything. College, support, love. Love isn't always enough, Tommy. Not when someone's determined to reinvent themselves as something they think is better. She smiled sadly. I see it in Jennifer too, that need to project an image rather than just be. Always photographing life instead of living it. And your mother enables it all, too worried about appearances to ever rock the boat. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Didn't do something. You did do something. Today, you stood up for what was right, even though it cost you. She reached over to squeeze my hand. Do you know how rare that is? How proud your grandfather would be. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking in a way we hadn't in years. Not the surface pleasantries of family dinners, but deep conversations about disappointment and dreams, about the paths taken and untaken. She told me about the young woman who'd fallen in love with a mechanic against her parents' wishes, who'd chosen love over security and never regretted it. About the dreams deferred but not forgotten, the small rebellions of a woman constrained by her generation's expectations. I wanted to be a teacher, she said as the afternoon sun slanted through her lace curtains. Had a scholarship to the state college and everything. But then I met James, and in those days you had to choose career or family. I chose family, chose your father and his siblings. And I don't regret that choice, but sometimes I wonder who I might have been. It's not too late, I said. You could take classes, volunteer at schools, tutor. She laughed, the sound more genuine than I'd heard in months. Always the problem solver, just like your grandfather. But I'm not talking about fixing the past, Tommy. Just acknowledging it. The paths we don't take shape us as much as the ones we do. By evening, I'd made a decision. Several, actually. I called my assistant and told her I'd be taking a leave of absence. Not a vacation, but actual time off to reassess priorities. I contacted a locksmith to change the locks on Grandma's house, knowing my father had a key and wouldn't hesitate to use it when he returned, demanding explanations or worse, money. And I started researching not European tours, but something else entirely. What are you doing? Grandma asked, watching me type furiously on my laptop. Making plans, I said. Did you know you can still get a passport renewed in 24 hours if you have proof of imminent travel? Tommy, no. I'm not chasing after them. Not to Europe, I assured her. Somewhere better. Somewhere they'd never think to go because it doesn't photograph well for social media or impress their country club friends. She leaned over to look at my screen, eyes widening. Vietnam. You mentioned once that Grandpa was stationed there before you met, that he'd always wanted to go back, to see it at peace, to replace the war memories with better ones. He did say that, she whispered, but it seemed so far, so complicated. It's a 16-hour flight, direct from Seattle, and November is perfect weather, not too hot, not rainy season. We could see Hanoi, Halong Bay, Ho Chi Minh City, eat pho for breakfast and banh mi for lunch, take a river cruise through the Mekong Delta. No five-star hotels or private tours, just real travel. The kind where you actually experience a place instead of just photographing it. But the cost would be about a quarter of what you spent on the Europe trip, and I'm paying for half. No arguments, I added as she started to protest. Consider it 20 years of birthday presents I should have given better. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, when would we leave? How does next week sound? Give you time to pack properly. Get any shots you need. Maybe practice some Vietnamese phrases instead of French. She paused, and I saw her wrestling with decades of conditioning that said she shouldn't want things, shouldn't take up space, shouldn't inconvenience others. Then, with visible effort, she pushed past it. That's perfect. The next week passed in a whirlwind of preparation. I helped Grandma shop for appropriate clothes, lightweight layers, comfortable walking shoes, a good sun hat. We got her vaccinations updated, arranged for her neighbor to collect mail, researched Vietnamese customs and cuisine. With each task, she seemed to shed years, the woman who'd been shrinking into herself at the airport expanding back into someone who took up space in the world. We also dealt with the inevitable fallout from the airport incident. My phone buzzed constantly with messages I didn't read, voicemails I deleted unheard. I knew what they'd say, variations on themes of disappointment, accusations of elder abuse, rich, considering the circumstances, threats about inheritance and family consequences. None of it mattered. I'd made my choice. 3 days before our departure, a registered letter arrived at Grandma's house. Legal letterhead, my father's attorney, demanding the return of misallocated funds and threatening action for interference with family affairs. I would have laughed if it wasn't so pathetic. Should I be worried? Grandma asked, reading it over my shoulder. No, I said, pulling out my phone. But they should be. I'd done my homework over the past week, consulting with colleagues who specialized in elder law. What my father had done, taking money under false pretenses, using it for his own benefit, had a name. Several names, actually. Fraud, elder financial abuse, theft by deception. The kind of charges that could end careers, destroy reputations, and yes, result in jail time. I composed a careful response through my own attorney, laying out the facts with clinical precision. The money given in good faith for a specific purpose. The deliberate deception at the airport. The witness testimony from airline staff. The paper trail showing where Grandma's $30,000 had actually gone, upgraded suites for my parents, expensive wine packages, private tours that she'd never take. If Mr. Carlson wishes to pursue this matter, the letter concluded, we are prepared to file criminal charges for elder financial abuse. The Washington State Attorney General's office takes such matters very seriously, particularly when the victim is a vulnerable adult and the perpetrator is in a position of trust. The threats stopped after that. Radio silence from the European front, though Jennifer's Instagram stories showed they were having a wonderful time. Eiffel Tower selfies and pasta in Rome, Swiss Alpine railways and Barcelona beaches. Each post was hashtagged #FamilyFirst and #blessed. Irony apparently lost on someone who'd abandoned her grandmother for better photo opportunities. Finally, departure day arrived. I picked up Grandma early, finding her dressed in the practical travel clothes we'd chosen. Her new passport tucked safely in her crossbody bag. She'd done her hair again, applied that same careful lipstick, but this time the excitement in her eyes was matched by confidence rather than hope. "Ready for an adventure?" I asked. "I've been ready for 60 years, she replied. The flight to Hanoi was everything the aborted Europe trip wasn't. No first-class pretension, just 2 seats in premium economy with extra legroom. No designer luggage, just practical carry-ons with everything we needed. No family drama, just easy conversation with flight attendants who were charmed by Grandma's attempts at Vietnamese phrases. "Your grandmother is wonderful," one attendant said as she brought us extra blankets. "Is this her first time to Vietnam?" "First time to Asia," I confirmed. "We're making up for lost time." "Better late than never," the attendant smiled. "My grandmother always says the best adventures come when you're old enough to appreciate them." Grandma dozed fitfully over the Pacific, and I watched her sleep. This woman who'd raised me as much as my parents had. Every school play they'd missed for work, she'd attended. Every baseball game where I'd scanned the stands for my father's face, I'd found hers instead. She'd been there for the small moments that actually build a life, teaching me to cook, listening to teenage heartbreaks, celebrating small victories that weren't impressive enough for my father's attention. We landed in Hanoi at dusk, the humid air hitting us like a warm embrace as we exited the plane. Grandma paused at the top of the jet bridge, taking in the foreign signs, the musical cadence of Vietnamese voices, the entirely different world she'd entered. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." The next 3 weeks were a revelation. Grandma, freed from the weight of others' expectations, bloomed like a flower in the Vietnamese sun. She haggled with vendors in the old quarter, laughing at her own pronunciation mistakes. She ate street food with enthusiasm, declaring the pho better than any French cuisine. She removed her shoes to enter temples, climbing steep steps without complaint, her careful movements full of determination rather than limitation. In Halong Bay, we took an overnight cruise on a traditional junk boat. While younger tourists partied on the deck, Grandma and I sat in comfortable silence, watching limestone karsts rise from emerald water like sleeping dragons. "James would have loved this," she said, not with sadness but with joy. "He always said still water held the deepest secrets." "Tell me about him," I said. "Not the grandfather I knew, but the man you married." So she did, stories flowing like the tide beneath us. The young mechanic who'd courted her with engine grease under his nails and dreams bigger than his paycheck. The way he'd proposed under a full moon, no ring because he'd spent his savings on his mother's medical bills. How they'd built a life together, paycheck to paycheck, rich in everything but money. "He never made it to Paris," she said as stars emerged in the clear sky. "But he made it to love, to family, to a life worth living. I think that's better." In Ho Chi Minh City, we navigated the chaos of millions of motorbikes, Grandma clutching my arm but grinning like a teenager. We visited the War Remnants Museum, where she stood for a long time before a photo of American soldiers who looked impossibly young. "Your grandfather never talked about the war," she said quietly. "But sometimes he'd wake up calling names I didn't recognize. Friends who didn't come home, I think. He'd be glad to see this country at peace." We took a cooking class where Grandma charmed the instructor with her knife skills, toured the Siu Chi tunnels where she insisted on crawling through a section despite my protests, cruised the Mekong Delta where she learned to weave palm fronds from a woman her own age who spoke no English but communicated perfectly through smiles and gestures. But the moment that will stay with me forever came in a small cafe in Hoi An, the ancient trading port with its lantern-lit streets and French colonial architecture. We were sitting by the river watching boats drift past, when Grandma suddenly laughed, really laughed, the kind that starts in your belly and takes over your whole body. "What?" I asked, delighted by her joy. "I just realized," she gasped between giggles. "They're probably in Paris right now, in some stuffy museum, checking their watches, worried about making their dinner reservation. And here I am, 70 years old, eating the best banh mi of my life while watching the sunset over the Thursday Bon River. And I wouldn't trade places for anything. No regrets about missing Europe?" She considered this, taking another bite of her sandwich. "You know what? No, not one. Europe will always be there, full of tourists and expectations and five-star everything. But this moment, this trip, this choice to do something just because I wanted to, this is what I've been missing my whole life." We extended our stay by another week, neither of us ready to return to reality. I taught Grandma to use my phone's camera properly, and she became an unexpected Instagram sensation among my friends. Her candid shots of daily Vietnamese life far more engaging than Jennifer's post-perfection. We sent postcards to no one, bought souvenirs we'd actually use, made friends with fellow travelers who were charmed by this intergenerational adventure. It was in a small shop in Hanoi's Old Quarter, our last day before flying home, that everything changed. Grandma was bargaining for silk scarves while I browsed the jewelry section, looking for something to commemorate our trip. The elderly shop owner, a dignified man with silver hair and kind eyes, approached me. "For your wife?" he asked in accented English, gesturing to the necklaces. "For my grandmother," I corrected. "We're traveling together." His face lit up. "Ah, a good grandson. Very rare these days. My grandmother raised me too after the war. There is no bond quite like it." We chatted while Grandma finished her negotiations, the easy conversation of travelers sharing stories. He told me about rebuilding after the war, about families scattered and reunited, about the importance of honoring your elders while they're still here to appreciate it. "Your grandmother," he said, watching her laugh with his wife over some shared joke that needed no translation. "She has good energy, strong spirit, like my grandmother, survived everything, still smiled." "She's amazing," I agreed. "This trip has shown me sides of her I never knew existed." "Travel does that," he nodded. "Shows us who we really are when the familiar falls away." "May I ask, where is the rest of your family?" Usually Americans travel in big groups. I found myself telling him the whole story. The planned Europe trip, the airport abandonment, the choice to stay with Grandma instead. His expression grew increasingly grave as I spoke, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "In Vietnam," he said finally, "we have a saying, the tree wishes to be still, but the wind keeps blowing. The child wishes to serve, but the parents are already gone. You understand?" "I think so. About not waiting too long to show love." "Exactly. Your parents, they will regret this. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but someday they will understand what they threw away for their pride." He paused, studying me intently. "But you, young man, you chose correctly, and the universe has a way of rewarding such choices." He excused himself, disappearing into the back of the shop while his wife wrapped Grandma's purchases. When he returned, he carried a small wooden box, aged and polished smooth by countless hands. "This was my grandmother's," he said, opening it to reveal an antique compass on a silk cord. "She gave it to me when I was young and foolish, thought money and success mattered more than family. Told me it would always point me toward what truly mattered. I've carried it for 60 years, but I think it's meant for you now." "I couldn't possibly." "Please." He pressed the box into my hands. Let an old man pass on what was given to him. Your grandmother is lucky to have you, and you are lucky to have this time with her. Not everyone gets such a gift. I accepted the compass with gratitude that went beyond words. Later, on the plane home, I showed it to Grandma, telling her about the shop owner's gift and his words about choices and rewards. He sounds like a wise man, she said, holding the compass up to the window light. Though I think he was wrong about one thing. What's that? You didn't choose me, Tommy. We chose each other. That's what family really is, not blood or obligation, but choice. Daily, conscious choice to show up, to care, to put love into action. We landed in Seattle on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the gray drizzle a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of Vietnam. But neither of us minded. We were different people than the ones who'd stood in the same airport 3 weeks earlier, abandoned and humiliated. We were travelers now, adventurers, a grandmother-grandson team who'd proved that the best journeys happen when you stop trying to meet others' expectations. The house in Ballard felt different too when I dropped Grandma off. The Europe guidebooks were gone, replaced by Vietnamese cookbooks and language primers. The refrigerator sticky notes now held Vietnamese phrases instead of French. And in the living room, where family photos had always held pride of place, new additions appeared: Grandma on the junk boat, both of us at the cooking class, her laughing with the palm-weaving woman in the Mekong. Will you stay for dinner? She asked. I want to try making that lemongrass chicken we had in Hue. Of course, I said. But first, there's something I need to tell you. A decision I made on the plane. She settled into her chair, waiting with the patience of someone who'd learned that the best stories can't be rushed. I'm quitting my job, I said. Not right away, but soon. Turns out spending 3 weeks watching you embrace life made me realize I've been sleepwalking through mine. 40-hour weeks that are really 60. Clients who see me as a service rather than a person. Success measured in numbers rather than meaning. What will you do instead? I don't know yet. Maybe teach. Maybe write. Maybe just travel for a while. See where the road leads. I've saved enough to take time figuring it out. I paused, then added the part that scared me most. I was hoping you might come with me sometimes. If you want. Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Tommy, there's nothing I'd love more. Though I should warn you, I've already started researching our next destination. Did you know there are river cruises through Eastern Europe that are much more affordable than... We were interrupted by the doorbell. Unusual for a Tuesday afternoon, especially since Grandma wasn't expecting anyone. I went to answer it, checking the peephole first, a habit I'd developed since changing her locks. A man stood on the porch, mid-60s with silver hair and a well-tailored suit that suggested prosperity without ostentation. He held a briefcase in one hand and a bouquet of flowers in the other, looking nervous in a way that seemed at odds with his professional bearing. Can I help you? I asked, opening the door but not inviting him in. I hope so, he said, voice carrying a slight southern accent. My name is William Chun. I'm looking for Eleanor Carlson. I understand she lives here. And you are an old friend. Well, more than that, actually. He shifted uncomfortably. I should explain. Eleanor and I knew each other many years ago, before she married James. We've kept in touch over the decades. Christmas cards, the occasional letter. When I heard about what happened at the airport, how did you hear about that? I interrupted, immediately suspicious. He smiled slightly. Eleanor emailed me from Vietnam. We've been corresponding more frequently since James passed. She needed someone to talk to who understood. Well, who understood loss and starting over? Tommy, Grandma called from inside. Who is it? I glanced back, then at the man on the porch. William Chun, I called back. Says he's an old friend. The crash of a teacup shattering was followed by rapid footsteps. Grandma appeared in the doorway, face flushed, eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't quite read. "William?" she breathed. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Ellie," he said softly, and the nickname combined with the tenderness in his voice told me everything I needed to know. "I came as soon as I could arrange things. I couldn't stand the thought of you facing this alone." They stared at each other for a long moment, decades of history passing silently between them. Then Grandma stepped aside. "You'd better come in. Tommy, this is William. We knew each other at university before I met your grandfather." But she was a terrible liar, and the way her hand shook as she gestured him inside suggested this was far more than an old college acquaintance. We settled in the living room, the broken teacup forgotten on the kitchen floor. William sat carefully on the sofa, flowers still clutched in his hands as if he'd forgotten he was holding them. Up close, I could see he was handsome in a distinguished way, with laugh lines that suggested a life lived with joy despite whatever complications had brought him to our door. "These are for you," he said, finally remembering the bouquet. "Gardenias. You mentioned in your last email that you missed having them in your garden." "You remembered," Grandma said, accepting them with hands that still trembled slightly. "You always did have a good memory for details. Only the important ones." He cleared his throat, seeming to realize I was watching this interaction with increasing curiosity. "You must be Thomas. Eleanor speaks of you constantly. Thank you for what you did at the airport, for choosing her." "It wasn't a hard choice," I said honestly, "though I'm curious how you fit into all this. Grandma's never mentioned you." They exchanged another look, and Grandma sighed. "It's complicated, Tommy. William and we met at university when I was studying to be a teacher, before I met your grandfather. We were engaged, actually," William added quietly. "Briefly." I looked between them, pieces clicking into place. The scholarship Grandma mentioned, the teaching career that never happened. "My parents didn't approve," Grandma said. William's family had immigrated from Taiwan. In 1962, that was difficult. My father threatened to disown me if I married outside my race. Different times, but no excuse for the prejudice. "So you broke up?" "I chose family over love," William said. No bitterness in his voice, just old sadness. "Went to law school, married a wonderful woman my parents approved of, had 3 children, built a good life. But I never forgot Ellie. And I met James 6 months later," Grandma continued. "Fell in love differently but truly. We built our own good life. Had your father and his siblings. We're happy." "But you stayed in touch?" I prompted. "Christmas cards at first," William explained. "Just keeping track, making sure the other was okay. Then when email came along, it got easier. When my wife passed 10 years ago, Ellie sent condolences. When James died 5 years ago, I did the same. Somewhere along the way, the emails became more frequent, more honest, more necessary," Grandma added softly. "William understood widowhood, understood starting over when you thought your story was already written. Your grandfather knew about our correspondence. He encouraged it, actually. Said everyone deserved friendship, especially the kind that had survived decades." I thought about the emails Grandma sent, hunched over her ancient laptop, typing with 2 fingers but determination. I'd assumed she was keeping up with distant relatives or church friends. Instead, she'd been nurturing a connection that transcended time and choices and the lives built in between. "So when you heard about the airport," I prompted. "I was furious," William said, the first real emotion breaking through his careful composure. I've watched Eleanor make excuses for her son's behavior for years through our emails. The casual cruelties, the taking for granted, the treatment of her as an obligation rather than the remarkable woman she is. When she wrote from Vietnam about what happened, about you staying with her, I knew it was time. Time for what? He set down his briefcase, opening it to reveal a stack of documents. I'm a retired attorney, but I still have connections. I've spent the last 2 weeks investigating exactly what Richard did with Eleanor's money. The paper trail is illuminating and actionable if she chooses to pursue it. I don't want to cause trouble, Grandma started, the reflexive response of someone who'd spent a lifetime avoiding conflict. Ellie, William's voice was gentle but firm. He stole from you, not just money, but dreams, dignity, the chance to see Paris like you and James always planned. That's not causing trouble. That's seeking justice. What did you find? I asked, leaning forward. William pulled out a file, his lawyer's precision evident in the organized tabs and highlighted sections. The $30,000 Eleanor gave Richard was deposited into his personal account, not the joint travel account he claimed to use. From there, it was used to upgrade his and Patricia's accommodations to luxury suites, purchase first-class train tickets between cities, book exclusive restaurant reservations, all things Eleanor wouldn't have benefited from even if she'd made the trip. So he planned it all along, I said, anger rising fresh despite having suspected this. The evidence suggests so. I also found email correspondence with the tour company from 2 months ago, specifically requesting that Eleanor Carlson's name be removed from all bookings. He never intended for her to go. Grandma was quiet, absorbing this confirmation of what she'd probably known in her heart. All those months of me planning, studying French, buying guidebooks. He knew. He let me hope and prepare and dream, knowing he would leave me standing in that airport. Yes, William said simply. And that level of calculated cruelty, especially toward an elderly parent who entrusted him with significant funds, constitutes elder abuse under Washington state law. We could pursue both civil and criminal charges. I don't know if I have the energy for a legal battle, Grandma admitted. I just want to move forward, which is why I've prepared an alternative. William pulled out another document, a settlement agreement. Richard returns the full $30,000 within 30 days, plus interest, and agrees to have no further contact unless you initiate it. In exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal charges. It's clean, simple, and from my research into his personality, the threat to his reputation and military pension will ensure compliance. I read through the agreement, impressed by its thoroughness. William had thought of everything: penalty clauses, enforcement mechanisms, even provisions for Grandma's ongoing financial security. This is incredibly generous of you to prepare, I said. The research alone must have taken dozens of hours. William looked at Grandma with an expression that made me revise my understanding of their relationship. When someone you care about is hurt, you do what you can to help, even if that's just paperwork and phone calls. Especially if that's paperwork and phone calls, Grandma corrected, smiling for the first time since he'd arrived. You always did show love through practical action. Some things don't change. They held each other's gaze for a long moment, and I felt like an intruder in my own grandmother's living room. I should go, I said, standing. Let you two catch up properly. No, Grandma said quickly. Stay, please. You're part of this, Tommy. The best part, actually. None of this would be happening if you hadn't chosen to stay with me. So I stayed, listening as two people in their 80s navigated the delicate process of reconnecting after 60 years apart. William told us about his life, the successful law practice, the children who were now doctors and engineers, the grandchildren he adored. Grandma shared our Vietnam adventures, showing him photos on my phone, laughing as she recounted her haggling victories and culinary experiments. "You look happy," William said, studying a picture of her on the junk boat. "Really happy. Like the girl I knew who was going to teach Shakespeare to reluctant teenagers and change the world one student at a time." "I was happy," Grandma confirmed. "For the first time in years, I did something just because I wanted to. No obligations, no expectations, no trying to earn love that should be freely given. Just adventure." "Speaking of which," William said, reaching into his briefcase again, "I brought something else." He pulled out a travel brochure, but not the glossy kind my father had spread across this same table months ago. This was worn, creased, obviously decades old. The cover showed the Eiffel Tower in what looked like 1960s photography. "You kept it?" Grandma breathed, recognizing it immediately. "Of course I kept it. The dream we never got to live. We spent hours planning that trip, remember? Two broke college kids thinking we could see all of Europe on summer job savings. We were going to stay in youth hostels," Grandma laughed. "Eat bread and cheese for every meal. Walk everywhere because we couldn't afford taxis. See everything because we might never get another chance." William's voice grew wistful. 60 years later, and neither of us ever made it to Paris." "I almost did," Grandma said quietly. "If my son hadn't, then let's go." The words hung in the air like a challenge. William straightened, the nervous energy of his arrival replaced by determination. "Let's go," he repeated. "You and me, and Thomas if he'll come. Not first class, not five-star hotels, not the trip Richard planned to impress his country club friends. The trip we dreamed about when we were 20 and thought everything was possible. William, we're in our 80s, which is why we shouldn't wait. Eleanor, I've spent 60 years wondering what if. What if I'd been braver? What if I'd fought harder? What if I'd chosen love over fear? I can't change those choices, but I can choose differently now." "This is crazy," Grandma said, but she was smiling. "We barely know each other anymore. Decades have passed. We're different people." "Are we?" William leaned forward. "Tell me you don't still read poetry when you can't sleep. Tell me you don't still prefer tea over coffee but drink coffee anyway because it's expected. Tell me you don't still dream about seeing the Louvre and standing where the great artists stood." Grandma's eyes widened. "How could you possibly know?" "Because I pay attention when you write. 8 years of emails, Ellie. Real ones, not the polite nothing everyone else gets. You told me who you are now, and she's remarkably similar to who you were then. Older, wiser, shaped by different experiences, but essentially you. I watched this unfold with fascination. My grandmother, who'd spent my entire life in Grandpa's shadow, was being seen, really seen, by someone who'd known her before she became wife, mother, grandmother. Before she learned to make herself smaller to fit into the spaces others allowed her. "What do you think, Tommy?" she asked, turning to me. "Should your grandmother run off to Paris with a man she hasn't seen in 60 years? "I think," I said carefully, "that you've spent 82 years doing what others expected. Maybe it's time to do what you want." "The boy's got wisdom," William said approvingly. "Though I should mention, this wouldn't be running off exactly. I have a proposal. A business proposal," he added quickly, seeing Grandma's expression. "Hear me out." He pulled out yet another document from his seemingly bottomless briefcase. "I've been thinking about this since I got your email from Vietnam. What if we started a travel company, specifically for seniors who've been told they're too old, too frail, too whatever to see the world? Real travel, not those awful bus tours that treat elderly people like kindergartners on a field trip." "A travel company?" Grandma repeated. "Think about it. How many people our age have dreams they've deferred? How many have children who think they know better, who limit their parents' choices out of misplaced concern or, let's be honest, convenience? We could offer small group tours, maybe 8 to 10 people. Places that require more cultural sensitivity than athletic ability. Local guides who understand that wisdom comes with age, not despite it. You've really thought about this, I observed. I've had 2 weeks and a lot of anger to channel productively. He turned back to Grandma. We'd start with Paris, of course. Our dream trip, but this time we'd bring others along. Show them what you discovered in Vietnam. That adventure doesn't have an expiration date. I don't know anything about running a business, Grandma protested. But I do. 30 years of corporate law. Remember? And Thomas here knows finance. Between the 3 of us, we have all the skills needed. Plus, he smiled, we have the most important qualification. We understand what it's like to be told you're too old for your dreams. The room fell silent as Grandma considered this. I could see her wrestling with decades of conditioning. The voices that said she should be grateful for what she had, shouldn't want more, shouldn't take risks. But I could also see the woman who'd haggled in Vietnamese markets, who'd crawled through war tunnels, who'd chosen adventure when abandonment had broken her heart. Paris first? She asked finally. Paris first, William confirmed. We leave in 2 weeks. Do the trip we planned in 1962, updated for who we are now. Test routes, find hotels that balance comfort with authenticity, build relationships with local guides. Then, if it works, if we work, we offer it to others. And if it doesn't work? William's smile was gentle. Then we'll have had Paris. That's more than we've had for the last 60 years. Grandma looked at me. This is insane. The best things usually are, I said. And for what it's worth, I think Grandpa would approve. He wanted you to see Paris. Does it matter who you see it with? She was quiet for a long moment, then stood and walked to the window that overlooked her small garden. William and I waited, understanding that this was bigger than a business proposal or a trip. This was about choosing a different story for her remaining chapters. I planted gardenias here when James and I first moved in, she said finally. They never took. Wrong climate, he said, but I kept trying for years, thinking if I just cared for them enough, they'd bloom. Eventually I gave up, planted roses instead. They're beautiful, but they're not what I dreamed of. She turned back to us, and her face held a resolution I'd never seen before. I'm tired of roses when I dream of gardenias. Yes, William, let's go to Paris. Let's start this crazy business. Let's prove that 82 is just a number, not a limitation. William's face lit up like sunrise. Really? Really? But, she held up a finger. Tommy comes too, for the Paris trip at least. I want my grandson there when I finally keep that promise to James. I wouldn't miss it, I said, throat tight with emotion. William stood, crossing to where Grandma stood by the window. Ellie, I need you to know. This isn't about recapturing the past. I loved my wife, had a good marriage, wouldn't change the life I built. But now, in whatever time we have left, I'd like to build something new. With you, if you'll have me. As business partners? She asked, but there was a teasing note in her voice. To start, he agreed. We've waited 60 years. We can take things slow. She laughed, really laughed. Slow? We're in our 80s, William. Slow is a luxury we can't afford. And then, in a move that surprised all of us, including herself, I think, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. Not the passionate kiss of 20-year-olds, but something better, the deliberate choice of 2 people who understood that time was precious and love, in any form, was worth pursuing. When they pulled apart, William was grinning like a teenager. So, Paris, she confirmed. And then the world. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation, but this time infused with joy rather than anxiety. William proved to be not just organized but thoughtful, creating an itinerary that balanced their 60-year-old dream with 80-year-old realities. Museums in the morning when energy was high, long lunches at cafes where they could rest and watch the world, evenings at small venues where the music mattered more than the late hour. He also handled the situation with my father with lawyer-like efficiency. The settlement agreement was delivered by courier, with a cover letter that made the consequences of non-compliance crystal clear. The check arrived within a week, the full $30,000 plus interest, accompanied by a terse note about avoiding misunderstandings. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just the money and silence. Should I feel guilty about taking it? Grandma asked, holding the check. Did you feel guilty when he took it from you? William countered. This isn't revenge, Ellie. It's justice. And more importantly, it's funding for your future instead of subsidizing his deception. We flew to Paris on a Tuesday, economy class, but with exit row seats William had somehow secured. Grandma sat between us, alternating between excitement and nerves as the plane lifted off. She held both our hands during takeoff, and I thought about how different this was from the lonely flight to Vietnam. Then she'd been reclaiming herself. Now she was building something entirely new. Paris in November was gray and drizzly, but Grandma declared it perfect. Sun would be too easy, she said as we checked into our small hotel in the Marais. This is Paris as it really is, not the postcard version. That first evening we climbed the Eiffel Tower. Or rather, we took the elevator, because William had quietly arranged priority access that avoided the lines. At the top, with Paris spread below us in a tapestry of lights, Grandma pulled out 2 items: the 1960s brochure William had saved, and a photo of Grandpa. "We made it, James," she said softly, touching the photo. "Not the way we planned, but we made it." Then she turned to William. "And we made it too. 60 years late, but who's counting?" "I am," he said seriously. "Every year was worth it if it led to this moment." I stepped back, giving them privacy, and thought about the strange paths life takes. 3 weeks ago, we'd stood in SeaTac Airport, abandoned and humiliated. Now we stood atop the Eiffel Tower, Grandma flanked by 2 men who loved her enough to prioritize her dreams over their own plans. The Paris trip was everything the failed Europe trip wasn't. We ate crepes from street vendors instead of Michelin-starred restaurants. We got lost in the Louvre, spending 4 hours in the Egyptian wing because Grandma was fascinated by hieroglyphics. We took a dinner cruise on the Seine, where William and Grandma danced to accordion music while other passengers applauded. But the moment that defined the trip came in a small cafe near Notre Dame. We were sheltering from a sudden downpour, cups of chocolate chawed warming our hands, when a couple at the next table struck up conversation. They were in their 70s, from Australia, traveling on their own belated honeymoon, after their children had told them they were too old for such adventures. "Nonsense," Grandma said firmly. "Age is just an excuse people use when they're afraid. Look at us. I'm 82, William's 83, and we're having the time of our lives." The woman leaned forward, interested. "But don't you worry about, well, all the things that could go wrong? Everything could go wrong staying home too," William pointed out. "At least here, if something happens, it happens while we're living instead of just existing." By the time the rain stopped, we'd exchanged contact information and rough plans for the Australian couple to join our theoretical first tour. The business that had seemed like a wild dream was suddenly taking shape, one conversation at a time. We returned to Seattle with full hearts and fuller plans. William stayed for another week, he and Grandma spending their days researching, planning, dreaming. They decided on a name, Third Act Travel, and a mission: Small group tours for seniors who refuse to be sidelined by age. Our children think we've lost our minds, Grandma told me one evening, after a day spent setting up the business structure. Richard sent a letter through his lawyer suggesting I need a cognitive evaluation. Jennifer called crying about how I'm being taken advantage of by strange men. Are you? I asked, though I knew the answer. If anything, I'm taking advantage of William. Poor man thought he was coming to comfort an old friend, and instead got roped into starting a business with a woman who can't even use Excel properly. I heard that, William called from the kitchen, where he was attempting to recreate the Vietnamese lemongrass chicken we'd taught him. And you're learning Excel just fine. Besides, you handle the people part. I just push papers around. You two make a good team, I observed. We do, don't we? Grandma smiled, but then grew serious. Tommy, I need you to know something. What's happening with William? It doesn't diminish what I had with your grandfather. Different loves for different chapters of life. James gave me a family, stability, 57 years of partnership. William's giving me adventure and the chance to write a completely different ending to my story. I know, I assured her, and I think Grandpa would be happy for you. He loved you enough to want you to be happy, even after he was gone. That's what William says too. She paused. Your father will never forgive me for this, for any of it. Choosing you over his trip, taking back the money, starting this business with William. I'm breaking every rule about how elderly mothers should behave. Good, I said firmly. Those rules were stupid anyway. 3 months later, Third Act Travel launched its first tour. Paris for Dreamers, a journey for those who refuse to give up. 8 travelers, ages 68 to 85, spent 10 days exploring Paris at a pace that honored both their dreams and their realities. Grandma and William led together, their combined energy and obvious joy in both the city and each other setting a tone of possibility that infected everyone. I joined for the first few days, watching with pride as Grandma transformed from the woman who'd been abandoned at an airport to a confident tour leader. She shared her story openly, encouraging others to share theirs. By the end of the trip, the group had bonded over more than tourist sites. They connected through shared experiences of being underestimated, overlooked, told they were too old for adventure. You've started something special, I told her as we said goodbye at Charles de Gaulle. I was heading home while she and William continued on to scout locations for the next tour. We've started something special, she corrected. None of this happens without you choosing to stay with me that day. You gave me the courage to choose myself. You always had the courage, I said. You just needed someone to remind you it was there. A year later, Third Act Travel has expanded to 12 destinations. Grandma and William, now business partners and what she coyly calls companions, split their time between Seattle and traveling. At 83, she's busier than she's been in decades. Her calendar full of site visits, tour planning, and lunch dates with the growing community of third actors who've discovered that life doesn't end at retirement. My father never did forgive her. Or me. We exist in a state of careful non-contact. Family gatherings reduced to separate holidays and acknowledged silence. Jennifer occasionally sends guilt-laden messages about how we've destroyed the family, usually right before asking if Grandma might babysit. The irony is lost on her. But for every family member lost, we've gained 10 new connections. William's children embraced Grandma immediately, delighted to see their father happy after years of widowhood. The Third Act community has become a chosen family of adventurers who understand that the best chapters might be the ones that come after everyone thinks your story should be over. Last week, Grandma called with news. We're going back to Vietnam, she announced. Full circle. But this time, we're taking 12 others who've been told they're too old for Southeast Asia. That's wonderful, I said. When? Next month. And Tommy, we have one spot left. Thought you might want to join us. My treat this time. And before you protest, remember that your father's 30,000 has funded quite a few dreams. Might as well fund one more. I thought about my own life changes since that day at the airport. The career shift to nonprofit work, helping seniors navigate financial planning. The relationship with a woman who understood that family was about choice, not blood. The weekly dinners with Grandma and William where we planned new adventures and laughed about old ones. I'll be there, I promised. Wouldn't miss it. Good. Oh, and Tommy? Pack light. We're adding a motorcycle tour of the High Van Pass. William thinks we're too old, but I say that's exactly why we should do it. I laughed, picturing my 83-year-old grandmother on the back of a motorcycle, probably wearing the same determined expression she did crawling through those tunnels. Grandma, you're going to outlive us all. Maybe, she agreed, but more importantly, I'm going to outlive us all. There's a difference, you know? There is indeed. And as I hang up the phone, fingering the Vietnamese compass the shop owner gave me, the one that always points toward what truly matters, I think about how that difference changed everything. How choosing love over convenience, adventure over security, truth over comfortable lies led us all to lives we never imagined. Sometimes the best journeys begin with missed flights. Sometimes families are forged not by blood but by who shows up when it matters. And sometimes, just sometimes, 82 is exactly the right age to start over. The compass spins freely for a moment, then settles, pointing steadily toward true north, toward chosen family and delayed dreams finally realized, toward a grandmother who taught me that love isn't about grand gestures at fancy restaurants but about staying when everyone else leaves, toward home in all its unexpected forms. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're like me, someone who spent years trying to earn love that was never truly offered, you know these aren't just stories. They're mirrors of our deepest wounds and greatest triumphs. Subscribe if these stories resonate with your journey. Hit that notification bell. Think of it as our regular meetup, where we share truths that others might not understand. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? What would you have done in my shoes? Your words matter to me, and they matter to everyone here who's walked this lonely path. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another story. Until then, remember, family isn't always blood, and sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who you truly are. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.